The air hung thick with the stench of fear, a metallic tang mingling with the dust kicked up by the shuffling feet of the condemned. A ragged breath caught in the throat of Alara, her eyes wide, unseeing as the rough hands of the legionaries dragged her towards the waiting stake. The crowd, a faceless, roaring beast, pressed in, their hungry gazes devouring her terror. This was not justice as we understand it, not a swift reckoning, but a prolonged, agonizing spectacle designed to strip away not just life, but dignity, hope, and the very essence of being. In the ancient world, punishment was a language spoken in screams and silence, a brutal art form perfected over millennia, etched into the very fabric of civilizations. You stand now at the precipice of that forgotten abyss, where the line between law and unimaginable cruelty blurred into a single nightmarish reality. The sun beat down with a merciless intensity on the barren plains outside Susa, baking the earth to a cracked ochre crust. Farhad, once a respected satrap, now a shivering husk of a man, felt the heat not as a comfort, but as a precursor to the inferno that awaited him. His crime? Whispers of disloyalty, a perceived slight against the great king, Darius, who ruled with an iron fist cloaked in silk. Farhad had argued, pleaded, even offered his vast fortune, but the king's justice was absolute, his wrath a slow-burning fire. He had been condemned to scaphism, the boats, a punishment so exquisitely cruel it was reserved for the most grievous affronts to the Persian throne, for those whose very existence needed to be erased with deliberate, agonizing slowness. You, the observer, feel the dry wind whip past your face, carrying the faint, sweet scent of blooming oleander from a distant oasis, a cruel contrast to the grim tableau unfolding before you. You can almost taste the dust on your tongue, the same dust that will soon mingle with Farhad's last desperate breaths. His guards, hulking figures with faces impassive as carved stone, led him to the riverbank, where two hollowed-out tree trunks, shaped like crude boats, lay waiting. They were not for passage, but for entrapment. Farhad's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He had heard the tales, whispers passed in hushed tones in the bazaars and royal courts, stories of men driven mad by the boats, their minds fracturing long before their bodies succumbed. He had always dismissed them as morbid exaggerations, but now, facing the reality, his carefully constructed composure shattered. The first boat, a thick, heavy log, was placed on the ground. Farhad was forced into it, his limbs splayed out, unable to move. His head and hands protruded from specially carved holes, his feet similarly exposed. The second boat, identical in form, was then clamped over him, creating a suffocating, coffin-like enclosure. Only his head, hands, and feet remained free, exposed to the relentless sun, the biting insects, and the prying eyes of the few morbid onlookers who dared to witness such a spectacle. A thick, viscous mixture of milk and honey was then poured over his exposed face. It was sweet, cloying, attracting flies and wasps almost immediately. He tried to flinch, to shake them off, but his head was held fast, his neck aching with the strain. The mixture trickled into his eyes, stinging, blurring his vision, filling his nostrils with its sickly sweet perfume. Farhad remembered his childhood, playing in the lush gardens of his father's estate, the taste of fresh dates and cool water. He remembered the thrill of his first military campaign, the roar of battle, the camaraderie of his soldiers. Now these memories were dissolving, replaced by the immediate, overwhelming sensation of the honey milk mixture drying on his skin, tightening, forming a sticky mask. The flies, initially a nuisance, became a torment. They buzzed incessantly, landing on his eyelids, crawling over his lips, probing his nostrils. He could feel their tiny legs, their persistent investigations, and a primal scream tried to escape his throat, but it was choked back by the mixture, by the terror, by the absolute inability to move. Hours bled into days. The guards, their faces still impassive, returned periodically, not to release him, but to feed him more of the milk and honey. He was forced to consume it, his stomach churning, his body rebelling. The constant intake, combined with the lack of movement, led to the inevitable. His bowels loosened, his bladder emptied, and the waste collected within the sealed confines of the boats. The stench became unbearable, a suffocating miasma of his own putrefaction. You, the unseen witness, recoil, your stomach lurching, but you cannot look away. The cruelty lies not just in the physical torment, but in the systematic degradation, the stripping away of every vestige of humanity. Farhad's mind began to fray. The flies, drawn by the putrescence, swarmed him relentlessly. They burrowed into the corners of his eyes, explored the depths of his ears, crawled into his mouth if he dared to open it to gasp for air. Maggots, tiny white threads of life, began to appear, drawn by the feast. They wriggled on his skin, in the folds of his flesh, in the wounds the flies had created. He could feel them, a crawling, living carpet of horror, devouring him slowly, piece by agonizing piece. His skin, exposed to the sun and the filth, began to blister and peel. His exposed hands and feet swelled, discolored, the blood within them stagnating. He no longer knew what day it was. Time had ceased to have meaning, replaced by an endless cycle of pain, itching, the buzzing of flies, and the gnawing sensation of the maggots. He tried to think of his family, of his wife and children, but their faces were fading, obscured by the grotesque reality of his present. He wanted to scream, to beg for death, but his voice was a raw, croaking whisper, unheard by anyone but himself. Even the guards seemed to have become spectral figures, moving in a haze, their faces obscured by the shimmering heat. He was alone, utterly and completely alone, in a world of his own decaying flesh. His thirst was an inferno in his throat, his hunger a hollow ache that gnawed at his intestines. But these were secondary to the overwhelming sensation of being eaten alive from the inside out and the outside in. The maggots were relentless, their tiny mandibles tearing at his flesh, creating open sores that festered and wept. Infection set in, a fever burning through his veins, making his vision swim, filling his mind with horrifying hallucinations. He saw Darius, the great king, his face a mask of serene cruelty, watching him, judging him. He saw his accusers, their faces contorted into mocking sneers. He saw himself, a young boy, running through fields of wildflowers, before the image dissolved into a writhing mass of insects. On the 5th day, or perhaps the 6th, Farhad's breathing became shallow, ragged gasps. His eyes, once bright with intelligence, were now cloudy, almost entirely obscured by the swollen lids and the crust of dried honey and insect detritus. The stench emanating from the boats was so profound that even the hardened guards had to stand at a distance, occasionally retching into the dust. He was no longer recognizable as a man, but a grotesque monument to suffering, a living, decaying corpse. His flesh, what was left of it, was a canvas of open wounds, maggot trails and necrotic tissue. You feel a profound sense of despair, a chilling realization of the depths of human cruelty. This was not a swift, merciful end, but a calculated dismantling of a human being, a prolonged torture designed to inflict the maximum possible suffering, to break the spirit before the body finally gave out. It was a message etched in flesh and blood, a terrifying warning to anyone who dared defy the might of the Persian Empire. Farhad's last breath was not a sigh, but a shudder, a barely perceptible tremor that rippled through his emaciated frame. Then silence. The flies continued their feast, undisturbed. The sun continued its relentless march across the sky. And the two boats, now a tomb of horror, remained, a testament to the nightmarish ingenuity of ancient punishment. His death was not an end, but a haunting echo, a chilling reminder of the absolute power wielded by those who sat on the thrones of antiquity. The forum hummed with an unusual, morbid energy. The usual clamor of merchants and politicians was muted, replaced by a low, expectant murmur. Marcus Valerius, a man whose lineage stretched back to the Republic's earliest days, stood before the praetor, his face ashen, his patrician toga rumpled and stained. His crime, one that sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened Romans, was parricide, the murder of his own father. This was not merely a criminal act. It was a violation of the sacred order, an affront to the gods, to family, and to the very foundations of Roman society. The punishment, pena culiae, the penalty of the sack, was reserved solely for this most unnatural of transgressions, a ritualistic execution designed to cleanse the city of such profound defilement. You, the silent spectator, feel the weight of the crowd's judgment, a palpable pressure in the air. You can almost hear the collective gasp of horror that had rippled through Rome when news of Valerius's crime had first spread. To kill one's father was to sever the most fundamental bond, to spit upon the ancestors, to invite the wrath of the infernal gods. Valerius, a man who had once walked with pride, his head held high, now stood slumped, his eyes fixed on the ground, unable to meet the condemning stares. He had denied it, of course, with desperate, trembling words, but the evidence, circumstantial though it might be, had been enough. The praetor's voice, a booming pronouncement, sealed his fate, painting a picture of a man utterly beyond redemption. The condemned was led away, not to the swift blade or the cross, but to a secluded spot by the Tiber River, a place where the sacred waters would become an instrument of terror. A procession formed, somber and deliberate. Ahead marched the lictors, their fasces wrapped in black cloth, symbolizing the severity of the occasion. Behind them, a piper played a mournful tune, its notes echoing the solemnity of the ritual. Then came Valerius, his hands bound, his feet bare, stumbling over the uneven ground. His mind, once sharp and calculating, was a maelstrom of fear and regret. He thought of his father, a stern but ultimately loving man, and the bitter arguments that had escalated into that fateful night. He remembered the flash of anger, the desperate struggle, the cold, dead weight in his hands. He wished for death, swift and clean, but knew it would not be granted. By the riverbank, the instruments of his doom awaited. Not a simple executioner's block, but a large leather sack crudely stitched from oxhide. Beside it, a rooster, a dog, a viper, and a monkey, each animal, a symbol of the crime's unnaturalness, a living representation of the chaos Valerius had unleashed. The rooster, with its crowing, represented the disruption of the natural order. The dog, a creature of loyalty, symbolized his betrayal. The viper, deceit. And the monkey, a grotesque parody of humanity, his descent into bestiality. You feel a chill creep up your spine as you witness this bizarre menagerie, each creature destined to share Valerius's final moments. The executioners, their faces grim, began the ritual. Valerius was stripped of his toga, his once proud body now exposed, vulnerable. His limbs were bound, his wrists tied tightly, his ankles secured. He watched, numb with terror, as the animals were brought forward. The rooster, squawking in confusion, was thrust into the sack first. Then the dog, whimpering, its eyes wide with fear. The viper, its scales shimmering, was carefully introduced, its venomous fangs a silent threat. Finally, the monkey, chittering in distress, was forced inside. The sack, once limp, now writhed with the frantic movements of the trapped creatures, their desperate cries a chorus of impending doom. Valerius was then pushed into the sack, his body contorting to fit amongst the struggling animals. The leather, rough and unyielding, scraped against his skin. The dog, terrified, snapped at his leg. The rooster's claws scratched his arm. He could feel the viper, a cold, slithering presence, moving amidst the chaos, its scales brushing against his bare skin. The monkey, in its panic, clutched at his arm, its sharp nails digging into his flesh. The air inside the sack became thick, foul with the scent of animal fear and his own rising panic. He tried to scream, but the sound was muffled, choked by the confining leather, lost amidst the frantic squawking, barking, and hissing. The executioners, with practiced efficiency, stitched the mouth of the sack closed. The last sliver of daylight vanished, plunging Valerius into absolute darkness. The sounds intensified, a cacophony of terror and aggression. He felt the sharp bite of the dog, the frantic pecking of the rooster, the cold, piercing sting of the viper's fangs. The monkey, driven mad by fear and confinement, scratched and bit at him, its small, strong hands tearing at his skin. He thrashed, he struggled, but the sack was too tight, the bonds too strong. He was utterly helpless, a human pincushion for the terrified animals, each one inflicting its own unique brand of agony. You, the witness, imagine the horror within that dark, confined space. The suffocating air, the crushing weight of the animals, the constant onslaught of bites and stings. You can feel the sharp pang of the viper's venom coursing through his veins, the dull ache of the dog's teeth, the frantic pecking of the rooster. The sounds from within the sack were guttural, primal, a symphony of suffering that made the onlookers avert their gazes, their faces etched with a mixture of revulsion and grim satisfaction. This was the price of parricide, a death that mimicked the unnaturalness of the crime, a descent into bestial chaos. Then, with a final chilling efficiency, the sack was hoisted onto a cart and slowly, deliberately, wheeled to the edge of the Tiber. The crowd, silent now, watched as it was pushed over the bank, tumbling into the murky water with a heavy splash. Valerius, still alive, still conscious, felt the icy shock of the river as it engulfed him. The water rushed in, filling the sack, pressing against him, mingling with the blood and waste in animal fury. He tried to hold his breath, to fight against the inevitable, but his lungs burned, his body convulsed. The animals, equally doomed, thrashed around him, their struggles a desperate dance of death. He could feel the water filling his mouth, his nose choking him, drowning him in a dark, cold embrace. His last thoughts were not of his father or his crime, but of a desperate, primal urge to breathe, to live, to escape this watery tomb. But there was no escape. The sack, heavy with its gruesome contents, sank slowly, carrying him deeper into the cold, dark depths of the Tiber. The river, sacred to Rome, had swallowed him whole, cleansing the city of his unnatural crime, but leaving behind a chilling testament to its brutal justice. You stand by the riverbank, the mournful notes of the piper fading into the distance, the ripples on the water the only remaining trace of Marcus Valerius, a man consumed by Rome's most terrifying punishment, forever lost in the embrace of the sack. His fate served as a stark, unforgettable warning that some crimes were so heinous, they demanded a death that transcended mere execution, a descent into a horror beyond human comprehension. The wind carried the scent of iron and ash across the plains of Nineveh. It was a smell that had become synonymous with the might of the Assyrian Empire, a brutal testament to its unyielding will. For the rebels of Amida, a small city that had dared to defy the great king Ashurbanipal, this scent was the harbinger of their doom. Among them was Kale, a farmer whose only crime was to have been born in a land that sought freedom. Now, captured after a siege that had turned his home into rubble, he stood with hundreds of his countrymen, their faces gaunt with starvation and fear, awaiting the infamous Assyrian justice, impalement. You, the silent observer, feel the raw, visceral terror of the captured. The sun, a searing eye in the sky, glares down on a scene of calculated horror. Before you, stretching as far as the eye could see, was a grotesque forest of sharpened stakes, their tips glinting menacingly. Each stake, a cruel monument to Assyrian power, awaited its victim. Kale's gaze swept across the landscape, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He saw the bodies of those who had already suffered this fate, their forms contorted, their agony frozen in time, a chilling tableau of despair. The sight was designed to break the spirit, to crush any lingering hope, to instill a terror so profound that rebellion would become an unthinkable act for generations to come. The Assyrian soldiers, their bronze armor gleaming, moved with a cold, methodical efficiency. They were not driven by passion or anger, but by a chilling devotion to the king's will, instruments of a terror state. Kale watched as the first of his comrades were dragged forward, their pleas choked off by the rough hands of the soldiers. He heard their desperate cries, the the sickening thud as their bodies were forced onto the stakes. He saw the convulsive spasms, the terrible arching of their backs, the final shuddering breaths as life slowly, agonizingly drained away. Each scream was a nail hammered into Cale's own coffin of fear. His turn came. Strong hands seized him, pulling him forward, his feet dragging through the dust. He tried to resist, a futile, desperate struggle, but he was weak, emaciated, and outnumbered. His mind screamed for escape, for a swift death, for anything but this prolonged public agony. He thought of his wife Ilara and their young son Aram, wondering if they too had perished in the siege, or if they were somewhere watching, helpless, their hearts breaking. The thought fueled a brief surge of defiance, a spark of anger against the overwhelming tide of despair. He was thrown to the ground, his face pressed into the dirt. The rough hands of the executioners turned him onto his back. He saw the stake, thick and menacing, its tip sharpened to a cruel point. It was taller than a man, planted firmly in the ground. The executioners, their faces impassive, positioned him. Cale felt a cold dread spread through his limbs, a paralysis more profound than any physical restraint. He knew what was coming, had seen it countless times in the faces of his fallen comrades. He knew the pain would be unimaginable, a fiery agony that would consume his entire being. Then came the impact. A sudden, searing pain, a tearing sensation as the stake pierced his flesh. He screamed, a guttural, primal sound ripped from the depths of his being. The executioners, using ropes and their own weight, slowly, deliberately, lowered him further onto the stake. The wood tore through his perineum, splitting flesh, crushing bone, forcing its way upwards through his internal organs. He could feel it, a blunt, agonizing intrusion pushing its way through his bowels, tearing through his stomach, his lungs. The pain was an all-consuming fire, a white-hot agony that eclipsed all other sensations. His body convulsed, his muscles spasmed uncontrollably, his vision blurred with tears and sweat. You, the unseen witness, feel the raw, piercing agony of Cale, a sensation that threatens to overwhelm your own senses. You imagine the tearing of flesh, the grinding of bone, the internal rupture of organs. You taste the metallic tang of blood in the air, a phantom sensation that makes your stomach churn. The sheer brutality of it is sickening, a testament to a civilization that understood how to weaponize suffering, how to turn the human body into a canvas of terror. The stake continued its ascent, slowly, inexorably. Cale's body sagged, his strength failing. He felt a sickening lurch as the tip of the stake pressed against his diaphragm, then pushed through, piercing his lung. Breathing became an excruciating effort, each gasp a fresh stab of pain. Blood, warm and thick, welled up in his throat, choking him. He coughed, a terrible rattling sound, spitting crimson onto his chest. His eyes, wide with terror, stared blankly at the sky, a vast, indifferent blue. The final descent was slow, agonizing. The executioners adjusted his position, ensuring the stake did not immediately pierce a vital organ, prolonging the torment. They wanted him to suffer, to serve as a living, agonizing monument to their power. The stake emerged finally from his chest, just below his sternum, a gruesome wooden spear piercing him through. He hung there, suspended, his weight supported by the impalement, his legs dangling uselessly. His arms, still bound, twitched spasmodically. The pain was no longer a single sharp agony, but a dull, throbbing torment that encompassed his entire body. Every movement, every breath, sent waves of excruciating pain through his ravaged form. Flies, drawn by the scent of blood, swarmed around him, landing on his open wounds, crawling over his face. He was conscious, terrifyingly conscious, aware of every agonizing moment. He could hear the cries of others, the distant shouts of the soldiers, the buzzing of the flies, all merging into a horrifying symphony of suffering. Days passed, or perhaps only hours. Time had lost its meaning. The sun continued to beat down, baking his skin, dehydrating him. His throat was raw, parched, his tongue swollen. His body, slowly dying, began to putrefy. The wounds festered, attracting maggots, which burrowed into his flesh, devouring him from the inside. He was a feast for the insects, a living corpse slowly being consumed. His mind, once sharp, now drifted in and out of consciousness, filled with hallucinations of Alara and Aram, their faces distorted by his agony. He saw his home, his fields, his life, all reduced to a distant, unreachable memory. You, the silent observer, are forced to confront the absolute despair of Kale's situation. You feel the relentless sun, the gnawing hunger, the burning thirst, the crawling sensation of insects on dying flesh. This was not just a punishment, it was a public spectacle of terror, a brutal art form perfected by the Assyrians to maintain their iron grip on a vast empire. Each impaled body was a silent sermon, a chilling warning to anyone who dared to dream of freedom. Kale's breathing became shallow, his chest barely rising. His eyes, though still open, were glazed over, unseeing. His body, once strong and capable, was now a withered, grotesque form, a skeletal frame draped in decaying flesh. He was no longer Kale, the farmer, the husband, the father. He was merely a symbol, a testament to the boundless cruelty of man. His last breath was a barely perceptible sigh, a release from the unimaginable torment. The sun set, casting long, macabre shadows over the forest of spikes. Kale's body remained, a silent sentinel of suffering, another chilling addition to Nineveh's gruesome gallery, a haunting echo of Assyria's nightmarish justice, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it. The air in the execution ground of Beijing was heavy, not just with the humid summer heat, but with a palpable sense of dread. For Wang Li, a revered scholar and poet, this was the end of his world, and the beginning of an unimaginable torment. His crime? Accusations of treason, of seditious writings that subtly criticized the emperor's reign. Such an offense, deemed an attack on the very mandate of heaven, demanded the ultimate punishment. Lingqi, death by 1,000 cuts, a methodical dismemberment designed to prolong agony, maximize degradation, and serve as a terrifying spectacle for the masses. You, the silent observer, feel the oppressive weight of the crowd, their morbid curiosity a tangible force. You can almost taste the fear, sharp and metallic, on your tongue. Wang Li, once celebrated for his elegant calligraphy and profound insights, was now a bound prisoner, his silken robes replaced by coarse, stained cloth. His head, usually held high with intellectual pride, was bowed, his face pale, etched with a profound despair. He had faced the accusations with stoicism, denying them vehemently, but the imperial court's judgment was final, its will absolute. He thought of his beloved wife, May, and their young daughter, Lotus, their faces now a blur of tears in his mind. The thought of their suffering, compounded by his own impending horror, was almost as unbearable as the physical pain he knew awaited him. The executioners were not ordinary men. They were specialists trained in the gruesome art of Lingqi, their hands steady, their blades sharp and gleaming. They moved with a chilling precision, their faces devoid of emotion, their task a sacred, albeit horrifying, duty to the emperor. Wang Li was tied to a wooden cross, his body splayed, vulnerable. He could feel the rough wood pressing against his back, the tight ropes biting into his wrists and ankles. His eyes, wide with terror, scanned the faces in the crowd, searching for a flicker of sympathy, a sign of humanity, but found only a sea of impassive or morbidly fascinated stares. The chief executioner stepped forward, his blade, a long, thin instrument, glinting in the sunlight. He began not with a fatal blow, but with a series of precise, shallow cuts. The first cut was to Wang Li's chest, a thin slice that barely broke the skin, drawing a bead of crimson. Wang Li gasped, a sharp intake of breath, his body tensing against the ropes. The pain was not yet overwhelming, but the psychological impact was immediate, a chilling realization that this was only the beginning, an agonizing prelude to a symphony of suffering. You, the unseen witness, feel the raw anticipation, the dread that builds with each precise movement of the blade. You imagine the cold, sharp edge against the skin, the delicate severance of tissue, the slow trickle of blood. The sheer methodical nature of the punishment is what makes it so terrifying, a calculated dissection of a human being, not in a moment of fury but with deliberate, chilling artistry. The executioner continued, his blade moving with practiced grace, removing small strips of flesh from Wang Li's body. Each cut was shallow, designed to inflict pain without causing immediate death. He worked on the arms, then the legs, then the torso, meticulously flaying the skin, piece by tiny piece. Wang Li's screams, initially sharp and piercing, became hoarse, ragged gasps, then whimpers, then nothing but a choked, guttural moan. His body convulsed with each new incision, his muscles straining against the ropes, his head thrashing from side to side. Blood flowed freely, staining the wood of the cross, dripping onto the dusty ground, a macabre artwork painted in crimson. He tried to focus his mind, to retreat into the inner sanctum of his thoughts, as he had done countless times during his meditations. But the pain was too profound, too relentless, a constant assault on his senses that left no room for solace. He thought of his poetry, of the beauty of nature, of the wisdom of the ancient sages, but these images were fragmented, dissolving into the overwhelming reality of his agony. Each cut was a new betrayal, a fresh wave of fire that consumed a piece of his flesh, a piece of his spirit. Hours crawled by. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the execution ground, intensifying Wang Li's suffering. His body, once a scholar's frame, was now a grotesque canvas of open wounds, a raw, bleeding mass of exposed muscle and sinew. The number of cuts mounted, nearing the fabled 1,000. The executioners paused occasionally, allowing him to regain a flicker of consciousness, to prolong the torment, to ensure he was fully aware of his fate. They offered him sips of water, a cruel benevolence that only served to sharpen his awareness of his dying state. You, the observer, feel the profound exhaustion, the agonizing persistence of life in a body that should have long since surrendered. You imagine the sensation of skin being peeled away, muscle fibers exposed, nerves screaming in protest. The air, once thick with dread, is now heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the faint, sweet smell of decay. The crowd, initially boisterous, had fallen into a stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Even the most hardened among them found it difficult to witness such a prolonged, systematic unraveling of a human being. Wang Li's breathing became shallow, his chest barely rising. His eyes, though still open, were clouded with pain and despair, staring vacantly at the sky. His body, ravaged and mutilated, was a testament to the absolute power of the emperor, a chilling warning to anyone who dared to question imperial authority. He was no longer Wang Li, the scholar, the poet. He was merely a vessel of suffering, a canvas for the ultimate expression of imperial wrath. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, the chief executioner stepped forward for the fatal blows. With swift, decisive cuts, he severed Wang Li's limbs one by one. Each severance was a brutal, sickening crunch of bone and tissue, a torrent of fresh blood. Wang Li's head, still attached to his torso, lolled to the side, his eyes still open, still seeing, still registering the final horrifying moments of his dismemberment. The last cut, a swift, clean stroke, separated his head from his body. It tumbled to the ground, landing with a soft thud in the dust, his eyes finally closing in eternal darkness. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, a release of pent-up tension. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the chirping of unseen cicadas. Wang Li's body, now a collection of severed parts, was left on the cross, a gruesome, fragmented monument to the emperor's absolute power. The executioners cleaned their blades, their faces still impassive, their duty fulfilled. You stand amidst the stunned silence, the image of Wang Li's prolonged agony seared into your mind, a haunting echo of China's nightmarish justice, a chilling reminder that some punishments were designed not just to kill, but to utterly annihilate the condemned, body and spirit, leaving behind only a shattered memory of their existence. The labyrinthine corridors of Knossos were not merely architectural wonders. They were a living, breathing entity, a stone beast that whispered secrets and held terrors within its shadowed embrace. For Lyra, a young woman chosen as a tribute, the labyrinth was a death sentence cloaked in ritual. She was not a criminal in the conventional sense, but a sacrificial offering, one of 7 maidens and 7 youths sent from Athens to appease the Minotaur, the monstrous offspring of King Minos's queen and a divine bull. This was not a punishment for individual transgressions, but a collective burden, a horrific tribute exacted by a vengeful god and a powerful king, designed to instill fear and maintain dominance. You, the unseen observer, feel the cold, damp stone against your skin as you navigate the claustrophobic passages. The air is thick with the scent of ancient earth, of fear, and of something else, something primal and unsettling. Lyra, her eyes wide with a terror that transcended tears, clutched the hand of her younger brother, Theron, one of the 7 youths. Their parents had wept, their despair a silent scream as they watched their children led away, bound for a fate more terrifying than any battlefield. Lyra's mind raced, desperate for a way out, for a chance to defy the monstrous destiny that awaited them. But the guards, the formidable Minoan warriors, were unyielding, their faces masked by bronze helmets, their spears a constant reminder of their absolute authority. They were led deeper into the labyrinth, the torchlight casting dancing shadows that seemed to twist and writhe, mimicking the dread in their hearts. The other tributes, once vibrant and hopeful, were now silent, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. They knew the stories, the terrifying whispers of the Minotaur, a beast with the head of a bull and the body of a man, dwelling in the heart of the maze, forever hungry. It was a punishment not for a crime committed, but for a birthright, for the misfortune of being born in Athens, a city subjugated by the might of Crete. The Minotaur's lair was not a single chamber, but a series of interconnected caverns, dimly lit by torches, the air thick with the smell of blood and something else, something musky and primal. Lyra's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She could hear it now, a low, guttural snorting, a heavy rhythmic breathing that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. Theron, clutching her hand, whimpered, his small body trembling. Lyra squeezed his hand, trying to offer a comfort she herself did not possess. The Minoan guards, with a final, chilling gesture, unchained them and pushed them into the chamber. The heavy stone door slammed shut behind them, plunging them into a terrifying semi-darkness. The snorting grew louder, closer. Lyra spun around, her eyes darting through the gloom, trying to locate the beast. The other tributes huddled together, their fear a palpable force, a collective shriek trapped in their throats. You, the observer, feel the claustrophobia, the raw, unadulterated terror of being trapped with a mythical beast. You hear the heavy breathing, the scraping of hooves on stone, the terrified gasps of the tributes. The air is cold, heavy, laden with the stench of death and the primal fear of being hunted. Then it emerged from the shadows. A hulking, monstrous figure, its bull's head massive and terrifying, its eyes glowing with a feral intelligence. Its powerful shoulders rippled with muscle, its hooves scraped on the stone floor. It let out a deep, resonant bellow that echoed through the caverns, a sound that vibrated through Lyra's very bones, freezing her in place. The Minotaur was even more terrifying than the legends, a creature of pure, unadulterated primal power. The beast charged, not at them directly but at the far wall, its horns scraping against the stone, a terrifying display of its strength. The tributes scattered, their screams finally breaking free, echoing through the chamber. Lyra, pulling Theron along, ran blindly, desperate to find an escape, a hiding place, anything to evade the inevitable. But the labyrinth was designed for one purpose, to trap, to confuse, to deliver its victims to the waiting maw of the beast. The Minotaur moved with surprising speed, its heavy hooves thudding on the stone floor. It cornered one of the youths, a boy named Nikos, who had been separated from the group. Nikos screamed, a high-pitched shriek of pure terror, as the Minotaur lowered its head, its sharp horns glinting in the dim light. There was a sickening crunch, a spray of blood, and then Nikos was tossed aside, a broken, lifeless rag doll. Lyra, watching in horror, felt her legs give way. Theron was sobbing, his face buried against her side. She knew with chilling certainty that there was no escape. This was not a trial of strength or wit, but a slow, agonizing hunt, a ritualistic slaughter designed to break the spirit before the body. The Minotaur was not a mindless brute, it was a predator that reveled in the fear of its prey, drawing out the terror, prolonging the suffering. The beast turned its attention to them, its massive head swinging, its nostrils flaring as it caught their scent. Its eyes, red and burning, fixed on Lyra and Theron. Lyra pushed Theron behind her, a futile gesture of protection, but a mother's instinct even in a sister. She stood defiant, her small body trembling, trying to project a courage she did not feel. She thought of her home, of the blue Aegean Sea, of the taste of fresh figs. She wanted to live, to fight, to defy this monstrous fate. But the Minotaur was too powerful, too relentless. It charged, its hooves thundering, its horns lowered. Lyra screamed, a primal sound of despair and defiance. She felt a searing pain, a crushing impact as one of the horns grazed her side, tearing through her flesh, sending her sprawling. Theron, shrieking, was snatched up by the beast, his small body disappearing into the Minotaur's massive arms. Lyra watched in horror, her vision blurring with pain and tears, as the Minotaur brought Theron's body to its mouth, its powerful jaws closing around him. The sounds that followed were sickening, visceral, the crunch of bone, the tearing of flesh. You, the observer, recoil from the sheer brutality, the raw, animalistic horror of the scene. You hear the screams, the gurgling, the wet, tearing sounds of a body being consumed. The air is thick with the coppery tang of fresh blood, the pungent musk of the beast. You feel the cold dread of being utterly helpless, of witnessing an unspeakable act of violence, a ritual of terror that transcended any human concept of justice. Lyra lay on the cold stone, her side gushing blood, her mind reeling from the horror. Her brother, her innocent, beloved brother, was gone, devoured by the beast. The Minotaur, its maw dripping with blood, turned its gaze back to her, its eyes gleaming with a terrible satisfaction. It was not a swift death, but a prolonged torment, a slow descent into despair as she witnessed the destruction of everything she held dear. The Minotaur approached her, its heavy breathing echoing in the chamber. Lyra closed her eyes, wishing for death, for an end to the nightmare. She felt the hot breath of the beast on her face, the rough texture of its snout as it nudged her. She could smell the blood, the raw meat, the primal scent of a predator. She waited for the final blow, for the crushing jaws, for the end of her suffering. But the Minotaur was not yet finished. It wanted to savor the fear, to prolong the agony, to inflict the maximum possible psychological torment before delivering the coup de grace. It played with her, nudging her with its horns, tossing her gently from side to side, a macabre game of cat and mouse. Lyra's body was racked with pain, her strength failing, her blood pooling around her. She was barely conscious, her mind flickering in and out of awareness, filled with images of Theron's terrified face, of her parents' weeping eyes. The Minotaur's final act was not swift. It gored her repeatedly, slowly, deliberately, its horns tearing through her flesh, prolonging her agony, until finally, with a powerful thrust, it pierced her heart. Lyra's last breath was a shudder, a silent scream that died on her lips. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared up at the cavern ceiling, reflecting the flickering torchlight. The Minotaur let out a triumphant bellow, a guttural roar that echoed through the labyrinth, announcing its victory. You stand in the aftermath, the silence deafening, broken only by the beast's heavy breathing. The bodies of the tributes, broken and torn, lay scattered in the chamber, a gruesome testament to Minoan power and the terrifying rituals that upheld it. Lyra's death was not an execution, but a sacrifice, a haunting echo of a terrifying ancient belief system, where the gods demanded blood, and kings exacted a horrific toll, leaving behind only the chilling legend of the Minotaur's embrace. The desert sun, a relentless eye in the sky, beat down upon the ancient city of Thebes. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the faint, sweet scent of lotus from the Nile, a stark contrast to the grim proceedings underway. For the vizier Imhotep, once a man of immense power and influence, revered for his wisdom, this day marked his descent into a living hell. His crime? Conspiring against the pharaoh, a treasonous act against the divine ruler of Egypt, a betrayal so profound it demanded a punishment designed to erase his very memory from the annals of history, to condemn him to a fate worse than mere death. You, the unseen observer, feel the oppressive heat, the suffocating stillness of the air, broken only by the distant murmur of the crowd. You can almost taste the dust on your tongue, the same dust that will soon mingle with Imhotep's last desperate breaths. Imhotep, his once rich robes now tattered and soiled, stood before the high priests, his face a mask of despair. He had been caught, his clandestine meetings exposed, his network of spies dismantled. The pharaoh, a young and ruthless ruler, had shown no mercy. Imhotep's pleas for clemency, his desperate attempts to defend his actions as being for the good of Egypt, had fallen on deaf ears. His sentence, to be cast into the pit of serpents, a punishment reserved for those who dared to defy the divine will of the pharaoh, to challenge the very order of Ma'at. He was led through the bustling streets, the crowds parting before him, their faces a mixture of fear, revulsion, and morbid curiosity. Children, clutching their mothers' skirts, pointed with wide, terrified eyes. Imhotep's mind, once sharp and calculating, was now a maelstrom of regret and terror. He thought of his legacy, of the monuments he had overseen, the laws he had drafted, all now reduced to nothing, his name destined to be chiseled from every inscription, erased from every papyrus. He thought of his family, his wife, Nefertari, and their children, now facing a lifetime of shame and ostracism. The thought fueled a bitter anger, a desperate defiance against the overwhelming power that had crushed him. The procession arrived at a desolate area on the outskirts of the city, a place of stark, sun-baked earth. In the center, a deep, circular pit had been dug, its sides lined with rough, unworked stone. A low, unsettling hissing sound emanated from within. Imhotep's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He knew the pit was filled with vipers, cobras, and other venomous serpents, creatures sacred and terrifying in Egyptian lore, now twisted into instruments of divine retribution. The high priests, their ceremonial robes gleaming white in the harsh sun, began their incantations, their voices low and resonant, invoking the wrath of the gods. Imhotep was forced to kneel at the edge of the pit, his eyes wide with terror, staring into the dark, writhing depths. He could see them now, hundreds of them, their scales shimmering, their forked tongues flicking, their cold, reptilian eyes fixed on him. The air grew heavy with the musky scent of reptiles, a smell that would forever be seared into his memory. You, the unseen witness, feel the raw, primal fear of Imhotep. You hear the chilling hiss of the snakes, the low, guttural chants of the priests. You imagine the cold, scaly bodies writhing in the pit, their venomous fangs waiting. The sense of inescapable doom is overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that smothers all hope. With a final chant, the priest signaled. Imhotep was seized by the temple guards, his struggles futile, and hurled into the pit. He fell, a scream ripped from his throat, landing hard on the writhing mass of serpents below. The impact sent a jolt of pain through his body, but it was nothing compared to the immediate, overwhelming sensation of hundreds of cold, scaly bodies slithering over him, around him, beneath him. The snakes, startled by his intrusion, recoiled for a moment, then, sensing fresh meat, they struck. Imhotep felt the first sharp bite, a searing pain in his leg, then another and another. Their fangs, needle-sharp, pierced his skin, injecting their deadly venom into his bloodstream. He screamed, a high-pitched shriek of pure agony, thrashing wildly, trying to dislodge the clinging serpents. But there were too many, their bodies intertwining, forming a living, writhing blanket of death. The venom began its work almost immediately. A burning sensation spread from the bite marks, searing through his veins. His vision blurred, his head swam, his muscles began to cramp. He gasped for air, but the suffocating mass of snakes pressed against him, their musky scent filling his nostrils, making him gag. He could feel their cold, dry scales against his skin, their powerful bodies coiling around his limbs, constricting him. You, the observer, feel the terrifying sensation of being overwhelmed by a multitude of venomous creatures. You imagine the sharp, burning pain of the bites, the insidious spread of the venom, the suffocating weight of the writhing mass. The sounds from the pit are a horrifying symphony of hisses, desperate cries, and the chilling rustle of scales. Imhotep's struggles grew weaker, his body convulsing uncontrollably. The venom was taking hold, paralyzing his muscles, constricting his airways. He felt a terrible tightness in his chest, a burning sensation in his lungs. His heart, once strong, now beat erratically, a frantic drum trying to keep pace with the encroaching death. He could feel the cold, slimy touch of a snake's head against his face, its forked tongue flicking against his lips. He tried to turn away to resist, but his body was no longer his own, a mere puppet of the venom. The high priests continued their chants, their voices rising and falling, a macabre soundtrack to Imhotep's agonizing demise. The crowd, initially murmuring, was now silent, their faces a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. This was the fate of those who dared to defy the pharaoh, a divine retribution, a punishment that blurred the lines between law and supernatural terror. Hours bled into what felt like an eternity. Imhotep's body was a canvas of bite marks, his skin discolored, swollen, his limbs contorted. He was barely conscious, his mind drifting in and out of a terrifying haze, filled with visions of twisting serpents, of the pharaoh's cold, unforgiving eyes. He was no longer Imhotep, the powerful vizier. He was merely a vessel of suffering, a testament to the absolute power of the divine ruler, a warning to all who witnessed his agonizing end. Finally, his breathing became shallow, ragged gasps. His body, racked by convulsions, stilled. The venom had done its work, shutting down his organs, extinguishing the spark of life. His eyes, though still open, were glazed over, unseeing, staring up at the harsh, indifferent desert sky. The snakes, their hunger sated, slowly began to uncoil, leaving his ravaged body amidst their writhing mass. A profound silence fell over the execution ground, broken only by the distant calls of desert birds. The high priests concluded their chants, their voices echoing in the stillness. Imhotep's body remained in the pit, a gruesome monument to the pharaoh's wrath, a chilling reminder of Egypt's nightmarish justice, where the gods themselves seemed to conspire in the downfall of the condemned. His death was not merely an execution, but a ritualistic annihilation, a descent into a terror that transcended the mortal realm, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed the pit and the serpents. The biting wind of a winter morning whipped through the cobbled streets of Ghent, carrying with it the stench of poverty, fear, and something else, something metallic and foreboding. Agnes, a young woman accused of witchcraft, her delicate hands believed to have conjured dark spirits, shivered not just from the cold, but from a terror that chilled her to the bone. Her trial had been a farce, a rapid descent into accusations fueled by superstition and fear, her desperate pleas of innocence drowned out by the fervent cries of the mob. She had been condemned to the iron cage, a public spectacle designed to shame, to torture, and to eventually slowly kill her, a chilling testament to the era's brutal justice. You, the unseen observer, feel the cold seep into your bones, the raw, biting wind that mirrors the chill in Agnes's heart. You can almost taste the stale air, thick with the breath of the jeering crowd, their faces contorted by fear and righteous fury. Agnes, her hair matted, her face bruised from a night in the dungeon, was dragged through the narrow streets, her bare feet scraping on the icy stones. The crowd, a faceless, roaring beast, pressed in, their hungry gazes devouring her humiliation. She heard their shouts, their curses, the fervent prayers for her damnation. She thought of her mother. A kind, gentle woman who had taught her the healing properties of herbs, knowledge now twisted into evidence of dark magic. The thought of her mother's despair, of the shame that would now cling to her family, was a torment almost as great as her own impending doom. The execution ground was a bleak, open space on the edge of the city, dominated by a tall gallows. But it was not the gallows that awaited Agnes. Instead, a massive iron cage intricately wrought with spikes and bars, hung suspended from a thick chain. It was a macabre sculpture, a testament to human cruelty, designed not just to contain, but to inflict pain. Its dimensions were just large enough to hold a human body in a contorted, uncomfortable position, preventing any rest, any solace. The executioner, a hulking figure with a leather apron and a grim, impassive face, awaited her. He was an instrument of the town's justice, immune to the pleas and the suffering of his victims. Agnes was hoisted up, her small, frail body a stark contrast to the heavy iron. She was forced into the cage, her limbs contorted to fit within its confines. The rough iron bars dug into her flesh, pressing against her ribs, her hips, her shoulders. She tried to shift to find a more comfortable position, but there was none. Every movement was a fresh stab of pain. You, the unseen witness, feel the crushing claustrophobia, the relentless discomfort of the iron cage. You imagine the cold, unyielding metal pressing against flesh, the sharp edges digging in, the constant, agonizing strain on muscles and joints. The air is thick with the cries of the crowd, a chilling chorus of condemnation. The cage, with Agnes trapped within, was then hoisted high into the air, suspended from the gallows, swaying gently in the biting wind. She hung there, exposed, utterly vulnerable, a living exhibit of the town's brutal justice. The crowd roared its approval, their voices a triumphant symphony of hatred and fear. Agnes looked down, her vision blurred by tears and the swirling wind, seeing the sea of faces, a blur of condemning eyes. She felt the cold penetrate her thin clothing, seeping into her very bones. The iron bars, already digging into her flesh, now grew colder, chilling her to the core. Days bled into nights. The cold was relentless, a constant, gnawing torment that never ceased. Agnes shivered uncontrollably, her teeth chattering, her muscles spasming. Sleep was impossible, a cruel illusion denied by the constant discomfort and the piercing cold. Her body, unable to find rest, began to ache with an intensity that transcended mere pain. Her joints stiffened, her muscles cramped, her skin grew raw where it pressed against the iron. The sun, when it finally appeared, offered no comfort. It merely highlighted her misery, casting long macabre shadows of her caged form onto the ground below. She was exposed to the elements, to the wind, the rain, the occasional flurry of snow. Her hair became matted, her skin cracked, her lips chapped and bleeding. She was given water, a small measure, and a meager crust of bread, just enough to prolong her agony, to ensure she remained conscious, aware of her slow, agonizing demise. You, the observer, feel the relentless cold, the gnawing hunger, the burning thirst, the profound exhaustion that permeates every fiber of Agnes's being. You imagine the pain of frozen limbs, the raw, chafed skin, the relentless assault of the elements. The sounds from the ground below, the distant chatter of merchants, the occasional laughter of children, the clanging of blacksmiths, were a cruel reminder of the life that continued, indifferent to her suffering. Agnes's mind began to fray. The constant pain, the lack of sleep, the relentless exposure, all conspired to break her spirit. She hallucinated, seeing her mother's face in the swirling clouds, hearing her father's voice in the whistling wind. She prayed, desperate, fervent prayers to a God who seemed to have abandoned her. She begged for death, for an end to the torment, for the release that seemed to hover just out of reach. Her body, slowly dying, began to putrefy. Her wounds festered, attracting flies, which buzzed around her, landing on her raw flesh, crawling over her lips. Maggots, tiny white threads of life, began to appear, drawn by the feast. They wriggled on her skin, in the folds of her flesh, in the wounds the iron had created. She could feel them, a crawling, living carpet of horror, devouring her slowly, piece by agonizing piece. Her breathing became shallow, ragged gasps. Her eyes, though still open, were glazed over, unseeing, staring blankly at the indifferent sky. Her body, once vibrant and full of life, was now a withered, grotesque form, a skeletal frame draped in decaying flesh. She was no longer Agnes, the young woman accused of witchcraft. She was merely a symbol, a testament to the boundless cruelty of man, a chilling warning to anyone who dared to defy the established order, to step outside the narrow confines of societal norms. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, her last breath was a barely perceptible sigh, a shudder that rippled through her emaciated frame. Then silence. The wind continued to whistle through the iron bars, a mournful dirge. The cage, with Agnes's lifeless body within, remained, swaying gently, a macabre pendulum ticking away the dark history of medieval justice. You stand below, the chilling image of the iron cage seared into your mind, a haunting echo of a terrifying era, where public humiliation and slow, agonizing death served as a brutal reminder of the consequences of perceived deviance. Her death was not just an execution, but a prolonged public spectacle, a descent into a horror that transcended mere mortality, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it. The dust of the Deccan Plateau swirled around the feet of the condemned, mingling with the heavy scent of exotic spices and the pungent odor of fear. For Covey, a village elder accused of sedition against the powerful Maharaja, his world was crumbling around him. He had dared to speak out against the heavy taxes, the forced labor, the injustices that plagued his people. His words, once respected, were now deemed treasonous, a direct challenge to the divine right of the ruler. His punishment, one of the most terrifying in ancient India, was to face the elephant's judgment, to be crushed beneath the immense weight of a trained war elephant, a chilling testament to the Maharaja's absolute power. You, the unseen observer, feel the scorching heat of the Indian sun, the dry, gritty dust that coats your tongue. You can almost taste the fear, sharp and acrid, on the air. Covey, his body frail with age, his spirit still defiant, stood before the Maharaja's court, his eyes blazing with a righteous anger that belied his physical weakness. He had refused to recant, to beg for mercy, choosing instead to uphold the truth of his convictions. The Maharaja, a young, ruthless ruler, had listened impassively, his face a mask of cold fury. Covey's sentence was swift, brutal, and public, a spectacle designed to crush not just his body, but the spirit of rebellion in his people. He was led to the execution ground, a vast, open field outside the city walls. The crowd, a sea of silent, terrified faces, parted before him. They mourned him already, knowing the horror that awaited him. Covey walked with a slow, deliberate dignity, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his mind filled with memories of his village, the laughter of children, the scent of fresh harvest. He thought of his wife, Sita, her face etched with sorrow, and their grandchildren, whose future he had tried to secure. The thought of their despair, of the injustice that would now be visited upon them, fueled a quiet, internal rage. In the center of the field stood the instrument of his doom, a magnificent, towering war elephant, its tusks adorned with gleaming gold, its massive body draped in rich ceremonial cloth. But this was no symbol of grandeur. It was a trained killer, an executioner whose every movement was controlled by its mahout, the elephant rider. The mahout, a stern-faced man with a cruel glint in his eyes, sat atop the beast, a sharp, curved ankus, an elephant goad, in his hand. You, the unseen witness, feel the sheer immense power of the elephant, a living, breathing force of nature twisted into an instrument of human cruelty. You hear its low rumble, the heavy thud of its massive feet on the earth. You imagine the overwhelming sensation of its presence, a terrifying embodiment of the Maharaja's absolute authority. Kavi was forced to lie down in the dust, his back to the elephant, his hands bound, his body utterly vulnerable. He felt the coarse earth against his cheek, the dry grit filling his nostrils. He could hear the elephant approaching, its heavy footsteps shaking the very ground beneath him, each thud a hammer blow against his heart. He closed his eyes, bracing himself, his mind trying to find a final moment of peace, a defiant thought against the encroaching terror. The elephant stopped directly over him, its massive shadow engulfing him. Kavi could feel the heat radiating from its body, the faint, musky scent of its hide. He could hear its heavy breathing, the soft rustle of its ears. He knew the end was near, a terrifying, crushing finality. He thought of his ancestors, of the sacred rivers, of the cycle of life and death, trying to find solace in the ancient wisdom of his people. The mahout gave the command, a sharp, guttural sound. The elephant, with a slow, deliberate movement, raised its massive forefoot. Kavi opened his eyes, staring up at the colossal foot, a mountain of wrinkled flesh and hardened nail, descending slowly, inexorably towards him. He felt a profound sense of resignation, a chilling acceptance of his fate. A silent prayer formed on his lips, a plea for his soul to find peace, for his people to find justice. Then came the impact. A sudden, unimaginable pressure, a crushing weight that flattened him against the earth. He felt his bones shatter, his organs rupture, his body collapsing inward. A scream tried to escape his throat, but it was choked off, silenced by the overwhelming force. The pain was instantaneous, searing, an all-consuming fire that obliterated all other sensations. His vision exploded into a blinding white light, then plunged into absolute darkness. You, the observer, feel the devastating impact, the sickening crunch of bone, the tearing of flesh, the complete annihilation of a human form. You imagine the sudden, overwhelming pressure, the instantaneous cessation of life, the profound finality of being crushed beneath such immense power. The sound is a dull, sickening thud, followed by an eerie silence, broken only by the heavy breathing of the elephant and the distant cries of the terrified crowd. The elephant remained, its massive foot planted firmly on Kavi's lifeless form, holding him pinned to the earth, a grotesque monument to the Maharaja's unyielding authority. The mahout gave another command, and the elephant slowly lifted its foot, revealing what remained of Kavi. He was no longer recognizable as a man, but a flattened, bloodied mass, his body utterly destroyed, pulverized into the dust. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, a wave of profound horror and despair. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant calls of birds. The Maharaja's message was clear, etched in the pulverized remains of Kavi. Defiance would be met with absolute, crushing force. You stand amidst the stunned silence, the chilling image of the elephant's judgment seared into your mind, a haunting echo of India's nightmarish justice. A brutal reminder of the consequences of challenging a ruler whose power was absolute, a ruler who wielded not just armies, but the very forces of nature as instruments of terror. Kavi's death was not just an execution, but a spectacle of annihilation, a descent into a horror that transcended mere mortality, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it. The biting winds howled across the frozen shores of the North Sea, carrying with them the scent of salt, blood, and the raw, untamed spirit of the Norsemen. For Bjorn, a chieftain captured after a fierce raid on a rival clan, this chilling wind was a prelude to a death steeped in legend, a punishment so brutal it was whispered only in hushed tones around flickering hearths. His crime? The murder of the rival chieftain's father, a blood feud that demanded the ultimate vengeance, a ritualistic execution known as the Blood Eagle, designed not just to kill, but to utterly desecrate his body and spirit, a chilling testament to the unforgiving justice of the Viking Age. You, the unseen observer, feel the raw, biting cold, the relentless wind that cuts through your very bones. You can almost taste the metallic tang of blood on the air, a phantom sensation that makes your stomach churn. Bjorn, once a fearsome warrior, his broad shoulders and muscular frame hardened by countless battles, now stood bound, stripped to the waist, his magnificent beard matted with ice and sweat. His eyes, though filled with a profound despair, still held a flicker of defiance, a warrior's pride in the face of inevitable doom. He had killed men, seen men die, but this was different. This was a death designed to break the spirit, to humiliate, to offer him to Odin in a manner so grotesque it would forever haunt the memories of those who witnessed it. He was dragged to the sacred clearing, a desolate, snow-covered space atop a cliff overlooking the churning gray sea. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unspoken threats. Around him stood the rival clan, their faces grim, their eyes burning with a cold, unforgiving hatred. Their chieftain, Harold, a man whose face was a mask of grief and vengeful fury, stood before Bjorn, his axe resting on his shoulder. Harold spoke, his voice a low, guttural growl, recounting Bjorn's crimes, detailing the blood debt that demanded this horrific repayment. Bjorn listened, his jaw clenched, his mind racing through memories of his own life, of his family, of the glorious battles, all now fading into the encroaching shadow of death. The executioners, chosen for their strength and their unflinching resolve, seized Bjorn. He was thrown onto a large, flat stone, his back pressed against the icy surface. His arms and legs were spread wide, bound tightly to stakes hammered into the frozen earth. He struggled, a desperate primal surge of resistance, but he was weak, outnumbered, and utterly helpless. He felt the cold stone against his bare skin, the rough ropes biting into his flesh. He could hear the rhythmic chanting of the clan, a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the very earth, a prelude to his agonizing demise. You, the unseen witness, feel the raw, visceral terror of Bjorn. You imagine the cold, hard stone against his back, the biting ropes, the chilling chants of the vengeful clan. The air is thick with the scent of pine and impending doom, a potent mixture that makes your senses reel. Harold stepped forward, his axe glinting in the dim light. He began not with a swift, merciful blow, but with a series of precise, brutal incisions. The first cut was a deep slice along Bjorn's spine, from his neck to his lower back, carefully avoiding the vital organs. Bjorn screamed, a raw, animalistic sound ripped from the depths of his being. The pain was immediate, searing, a fiery agony that spread across his back, drenching the stone in crimson. His body convulsed, his muscles spasmed uncontrollably, his head thrashing from side to side. The executioners then used their blades to sever Bjorn's ribs from his spine, one by agonizing one. Each cut was a sickening crunch of bone, a tearing of flesh, a torrent of fresh blood. Bjorn's screams became hoarse, ragged gasps, then whimpers, then nothing but a choked, guttural moan. His body strained against the ropes, his muscles quivering with the effort, his mind struggling to comprehend the unimaginable torment being inflicted upon him. You, the observer, feel the profound agony, the excruciating precision of each cut, the sickening sound of bone being severed from its anchor. You imagine the raw, exposed flesh, the delicate internal structures being brutally manipulated. The cold air, once biting, now feels like a searing flame against his open wounds. With each severed rib, Harold and his men reached in, pulling the ribs away from Bjorn's spine, slowly, deliberately, creating a gruesome, winged shape. The pain was beyond comprehension, a constant, burning inferno that consumed his entire being. He could feel his lungs collapsing, his breathing becoming shallow, rattling gasps. Blood, warm and thick, welled up in his throat, choking him. He coughed, a terrible gurgling sound, spitting crimson onto his chest. His eyes, wide with terror and agony, stared blankly at the bruised sky, a vast, indifferent canvas. The process continued, each rib a new betrayal, each pull a fresh wave of fire that consumed a piece of his flesh, a piece of his spirit. His back was now a gaping, bloody wound, his ribs splayed outwards like grotesque wings, mimicking the outstretched wings of a bird of prey. The very act of breathing was an excruciating effort, each gasp sending waves of agony through his ravaged form. He was conscious, terrifyingly conscious, aware of every agonizing moment, every tearing of flesh, every crunch of bone. You, the observer, confront the absolute horror of the blood eagle, a punishment so graphic, so visceral, it pushes the boundaries of human endurance. You imagine the sensation of your own ribs being torn from your spine, your lungs exposed to the biting cold. The air is thick with the coppery tang of fresh blood, the pungent musk of raw flesh. The chanting of the clan, once a distant drone, now seems to invade your very mind, a chilling soundtrack to this ultimate act of vengeance. Bjorn's breathing became shallow, his chest barely rising. His eyes, though still open, were clouded with pain and despair, staring vacantly at the sky. His body, once a warrior's frame, was now a grotesque canvas of open wounds, a raw, bleeding mass of exposed muscle, sinew, and bone. He was no longer Bjorn, the chieftain, the warrior. He was merely a symbol, a testament to the boundless cruelty of man, a chilling warning to anyone who dared to incur the wrath of a vengeful clan. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, Harold stepped forward for the final ritualistic act. He sprinkled salt into Bjorn's open wounds, a final, searing torment, a symbolic offering to Odin. Bjorn's body convulsed one last time, a silent scream that died on his lips. His last breath was a shudder, a barely perceptible tremor that rippled through his emaciated frame. Then silence. The wind continued to howl, a mournful dirge echoing across the frozen landscape. Bjorn's body, his ribs splayed outwards like blood-soaked wings, remained on the stone, a gruesome monument to Viking vengeance, a chilling testament to the unforgiving justice of the Norsemen. You stand amidst the stunned silence, the chilling image of the blood eagle seared into your mind, a haunting echo of a terrifying ancient practice, where the line between justice and ritualistic torture blurred into a single, nightmarish reality. His death was not just an execution, but a profound act of desecration, a descent into a horror that transcended mere mortality, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it. The sun beat down with a relentless fury on the ancient city of Akragas in Sicily, baking the earth to a cracked, ochre crust. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the faint, metallic scent of bronze from the bustling workshops, a stark contrast to the grim proceedings underway. For Aristos, a wealthy merchant accused of embezzling funds from the tyrant Phalaris, this day marked his descent into a terrifying, fiery hell. His crime, a direct challenge to the tyrant's authority, demanded a punishment so exquisite in its cruelty it was whispered only in hushed tones. The brazen bull, a terrifying invention designed to prolong agony, amplify screams, and serve as a chilling testament to Phalaris's absolute power. You, the unseen observer, feel the oppressive heat, the suffocating stillness of the air, broken only by the distant murmur of the crowd. You can almost taste the dust on your tongue, the same dust that will soon mingle with Aristos's last desperate breaths. Aristos, his once fine robes now tattered and soiled, stood before Phalaris, his face a mask of despair. He had been caught, his ledgers scrutinized, his hidden wealth discovered. His pleas for mercy, his desperate attempts to offer restitution, had fallen on deaf ears. Phalaris, a ruler renowned for his cruelty, had merely smiled, a chilling, humorless grimace. Aristos's sentence was swift, brutal, and public, a spectacle designed to crush not just his body, but the spirit of defiance in his people. He was led through the bustling marketplace, the crowds parting before him, their faces a mixture of fear, revulsion, and morbid curiosity. Children, clutching their mothers' skirts, pointed with wide, terrified eyes. Aristos's mind, once sharp and calculating, was now a maelstrom of regret and terror. He thought of his family, his wife, Ilara, and their children, now facing a lifetime of shame and destitution. The thought of their despair, of the injustice that would now be visited upon them, fueled a bitter anger, a desperate defiance against the overwhelming power that had crushed him. The procession arrived at the execution ground, a vast open field outside the city walls. In the center stood the instrument of his doom, a colossal bull cast in gleaming bronze, its surface reflecting the harsh sunlight. It was a masterpiece of metallurgy, a terrifying sculpture of a beast, its hollow interior designed to hold a human being. A hinged door on its side, barely visible, was the entrance to this fiery tomb. Its head, sculpted with terrifying realism, concealed a complex system of tubes and acoustic devices, designed to amplify the screams of the victim, transforming them into the roaring bellows of a bull. You, the unseen witness, feel the sheer, overwhelming presence of the brazen bull, a terrifying monument to human ingenuity twisted into an instrument of unspeakable cruelty. You imagine the cold, hard bronze, the hollow interior, the chilling purpose behind its artistic design. The air grows heavy with a sense of impending doom, a suffocating blanket that smothers all hope. The executioners, hulking figures with leather aprons and grim, impassive faces, seized Aristos. He struggled, a desperate primal surge of resistance, but he was weak, emaciated, and outnumbered. He was forced through the hinged door, into the dark, claustrophobic interior of the bronze bull. The air inside was already thick, metallic, suffocating. He could feel the cold, unyielding bronze against his skin, the crushing tightness of the space. He tried to turn, to stand, but there was no room. He was forced into a fetal position, his limbs cramped, his body contorted. The heavy door clanged shut, plunging Aristos into absolute darkness. The sound echoed in the hollow interior, a final, chilling punctuation mark to his freedom. He was alone, utterly alone, entombed within the belly of the bronze beast. He could hear the muffled sounds from outside, the distant murmur of the crowd, the shouts of the executioners, all distorted, distant, dreamlike. Then he felt the heat. It began subtly, a faint warmth radiating from the bronze, slowly, inexorably intensifying. Fires had been lit beneath the bull, and the bronze, a magnificent conductor of heat, began to warm, then to grow hot, then to become searingly, agonizingly hot. Aristos screamed, a raw, guttural sound ripped from the depths of his being. The heat was an all-consuming inferno, a fiery agony that spread across his entire body, burning his skin, charring his flesh. You, the observer, feel the intense, suffocating heat, the searing pain of bronze against flesh, the terrifying realization of being cooked alive. You hear the muffled screams, distorted and amplified, emanating from the bull, a chilling, subhuman bellow that sends shivers down your spine. He thrashed, he struggled, desperate to escape the inferno, but there was no escape. The bronze was relentless, its heat penetrating his skin, boiling his blood, cooking his internal organs. The air within the bull became thick, acrid, filled with the stench of burning flesh, his own flesh. His lungs burned, each breath a searing agony. His vision blurred, his head swam, his mind reeling from the overwhelming torment. He could hear his own screams, amplified and distorted, echoing through the bull's acoustic tubes, transformed into the terrifying bellows of a dying beast. Hours bled into what felt like an eternity. Aristos's body was a canvas of burns, his skin blackened, blistered, his flesh cooking, melting from his bones. He was barely conscious, his mind drifting in and out of a terrifying haze, filled with visions of twisting flames, of Phalaris's cruel, smiling face. He was no longer Aristos, the wealthy merchant. He was merely a vessel of suffering, a testament to the absolute power of the tyrant, a warning to all who witnessed his agonizing end. His screams, initially piercing, became hoarse, ragged gasps, then whimpers, then nothing but a choked, guttural moan, until even those faded into silence. The heat was relentless, slowly, inexorably consuming him. His body, racked by convulsions, stilled. The fire had done its work, shutting down his organs, extinguishing the spark of life. His eyes, though still open, were glazed over, unseeing, staring into the absolute darkness of his bronze tomb. A profound silence fell over the execution ground, broken only by the crackling of the fires beneath the bowl and the distant murmur of the crowd. Phalaris's message was clear, etched in the charred remains within the bowl. Defiance would be met with absolute, fiery annihilation. You stand amidst the stunned silence, the chilling image of the brazen bull seared into your mind, a haunting echo of Sicily's nightmarish justice, a brutal reminder of the consequences of challenging a ruler whose power was absolute, a ruler who wielded not just armies, but the very elements as instruments of terror. Aristos's death was not just an execution, but a spectacle of annihilation, a descent into a horror that transcended mere mortality, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it. The damp, cold air of the dungeon clung to Elias like a shroud, carrying with it the stench of stale blood, human waste, and despair. For Elias, a humble tailor accused of heresy by the Inquisition, this was the antechamber to hell, a place where the line between truth and agony blurred into a terrifying, agonizing nightmare. His crime? Owning a forbidden translation of Scripture, a pursuit of knowledge deemed an affront to the Church, a direct challenge to its absolute authority. His punishment, one of the most feared instruments of medieval justice, was the rack, a device designed not just to extract confessions, but to systematically dismantle the human body and spirit, a chilling testament to the era's brutal zealotry. You, the unseen observer, feel the cold, clammy stone against your skin, the suffocating darkness of the dungeon. You can almost taste the fear, sharp and metallic, on your tongue. Elias, his body already bruised and battered from previous interrogations, stood before the inquisitors, his face pale, etched with a profound weariness. He had denied the accusations, pleaded his innocence, affirmed his faith, but his words were met with stony silence, with accusations of obduracy and demonic influence. The inquisitors, their faces grim, their eyes burning with a cold, righteous certainty, believed they were saving his soul, even if it meant destroying his body. He was led deeper into the dungeon, to a chamber where the instruments of torture awaited. The air grew heavy with a sense of impending doom, a suffocating blanket that smothered all hope. In the center of the room stood the rack, a large wooden frame with rollers at both ends, a terrifying contraption designed to stretch and dislocate the human body. Beside it, a brazier glowed with hot coals, casting dancing shadows that seemed to twist and writhe, mimicking the dread in Elias's heart. The inquisitors, their black robes blending into the shadows, began their final exhortations, their voices low and resonant, urging Elias to confess, to repent, to save his soul from eternal damnation. Elias listened, his mind a maelstrom of fear and desperate defiance. He thought of his wife Martha and their young son Thomas, their faces now a blur of tears in his mind. The thought of their despair, of the shame that would now cling to his family, fueled a bitter anger, a desperate struggle against the overwhelming power that had crushed him. You, the unseen witness, feel the raw, primal fear of Elias. You hear the low, guttural chants of the inquisitors, the chilling silence that follows. You imagine the cold, hard wood of the rack, the terrifying purpose behind its simple design. The sense of inescapable doom is overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that smothers all hope. The executioners, hulking figures with leather aprons and grim, impassive faces, seized Elias. He struggled, a desperate, primal surge of resistance, but he was weak, exhausted and outnumbered. His hands were tied to one roller, his feet to the other. He felt the rough ropes biting into his wrists and ankles, the cold wood pressing against his back. He could hear the creaking of the mechanism as the executioners began to turn the rollers, slowly, inexorably stretching his body. The first sensation was a dull ache, a stretching of his limbs, a feeling of his joints pulling apart. Elias gasped, a sharp intake of breath, his body tensing against the ropes. The pain was not yet overwhelming, but the psychological impact was immediate, a chilling realization that this was only the beginning, an agonizing prelude to a symphony of suffering. The inquisitors watched, their faces impassive, their eyes fixed on Elias, searching for any sign of a confession, any crack in his resolve. You, the observer, feel the slow, agonizing stretch, the terrifying sensation of your own body being pulled apart. You imagine the muscles tearing, the ligaments straining, the joints groaning under immense pressure. The air is thick with the scent of fear and damp stone, a potent mixture that makes your senses reel. The executioners continued to turn the rollers, slowly, deliberately increasing the tension. Elias's body was stretched taut, his muscles screaming in protest. He felt a searing pain in his shoulders, then his hips, then his knees. His joints, strained to their breaking point, began to dislocate, one by agonizing one. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound ripped from the depths of his being. The pain was an all-consuming fire, a white-hot agony that eclipsed all other sensations. His body convulsed, his muscles spasmed uncontrollably, his head thrashing from side to side. He heard the sickening pops and cracks as his shoulders dislocated, then his hips. The pain was beyond comprehension, a constant, burning inferno that consumed his entire being. He could feel his limbs lengthening, his body distorting, tearing itself apart. Blood, warm and thick, welled up in his throat, choking him. He coughed, a terrible rattling sound, spitting crimson onto his chest. His eyes, wide with terror and agony, stared blankly at the dark ceiling, a vast, indifferent canvas. The inquisitors pressed him for a confession, their voices calm, measured, a chilling contrast to his agonizing screams. "Confess, Elias. Confess your heresy and save your immortal soul." But Elias, even amidst the unimaginable pain, clung to his truth, his mind clouded by agony, but his spirit refusing to break. He was a tailor, a simple man, but he would not betray his conscience, even if it meant enduring this living hell. Hours bled into what felt like an eternity. Elias's body was a grotesque canvas of dislocated limbs, stretched muscles and torn flesh. He was barely conscious, his mind drifting in and out of a terrifying haze, filled with visions of twisting demons, of the Inquisitor's cold, unforgiving eyes. He was no longer Elias, the tailor. He was merely a vessel of suffering, a testament to the absolute power of the Church, a warning to all who witnessed his agonizing end. You, the observer, confront the absolute horror of the rack, a punishment so graphic, so visceral, it pushes the boundaries of human endurance. You imagine the sensation of your own limbs being pulled from their sockets, your muscles tearing, your body stretched beyond its limits. The air is thick with the coppery tang of fresh blood, the pungent musk of raw flesh. The cold, damp stone seems to absorb his screams, amplifying the chilling silence that follows. Finally, his breathing became shallow, ragged gasps. His body, racked by convulsions, stilled. The rack had done its work, systematically dismantling him, extinguishing the spark of life. His eyes, though still open, were glazed over, unseeing, staring into the absolute darkness of the dungeon. The inquisitors, their faces still grim, recorded his death, perhaps noting his stubborn refusal to confess, damning his soul even in his demise. A profound silence fell over the torture chamber, broken only by the distant drip of water. Elias's body, a broken, distorted form, remained on the rack, a gruesome monument to the Inquisition's relentless pursuit of truth, a chilling reminder of medieval Europe's nightmarish justice. where faith and fear converged to create an instrument of unspeakable torment. His death was not just an execution, but a systematic annihilation, a descent into a horror that transcended mere mortality, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it. The thin, biting air of the high Andes whistled through the mountain passes, carrying with it the scent of llama dung, dry earth, and the palpable fear of the condemned. For Capac, a once respected administrator in the vast Inca Empire, this day marked his descent into a living death, a punishment more insidious than any blade. His crime? Misappropriation of royal resources, a betrayal of the Sapa Inca, the divine ruler, an act deemed an affront to the very fabric of the communal hierarchical society. His sentence, to be cast into the pit of disgrace, a terrifying form of social annihilation and slow starvation, a chilling testament to the Inca's absolute control over life and death. You, the unseen observer, feel the biting cold, the relentless wind that cuts through your very bones. You can almost taste the dry, dusty air, thick with the breath of the silent, somber crowd. Capac, his once rich textiles replaced by coarse, threadbare cloth, stood before the high priests and royal judges, his face pale, etched with a profound despair. He had denied the accusations, pleaded for his family, offered to repay tenfold, but his words were met with stony silence, with accusations of greed and disloyalty. The Sapa Inca's justice was absolute, his wrath a slow-burning fire that consumed not just the individual, but their very place in the cosmos. He was led through the terraced fields and bustling markets of Cusco, the capital. The crowds, usually vibrant and noisy, were hushed, their faces a mixture of fear, revulsion, and morbid curiosity. Children, clutching their mothers' skirts, averted their gazes, taught from birth to fear the gaze of the condemned. Capac's mind, once sharp and organized, was now a maelstrom of regret and terror. He thought of his wife, Mama Aklo, and their children, now facing a lifetime of shame and ostracism, their names forever tainted. The thought of their despair, of the utter destruction of his family's future, fueled a bitter anger, a desperate defiance against the overwhelming power that had crushed him. The procession arrived at a desolate area on the outskirts of the city, a place of stark, sun-baked earth, high on a windswept plateau. In the center, a deep, circular pit had been dug, its sides lined with rough, unworked stone. It was not a pit of spears or serpents, but a pit of slow, agonizing starvation and exposure, a tomb of shame. A small, crude platform extended over the pit's edge, where Capac would be forced to stand, a living exhibit of his disgrace. The high priests, their ceremonial robes gleaming in the harsh sun, began their incantations, their voices low and resonant, invoking the wrath of Inti, the sun god, and Pachamama, the earth mother. Capac was forced onto the platform, his eyes wide with terror, staring into the dark, empty depths of the pit below. He could feel the cold wind whipping around him, tearing at his thin clothing. He knew the pit was a symbol of his utter abandonment, his severance from the communal life of the Inca. You, the unseen witness, feel the raw, primal fear of Capac. You hear the low, guttural chants of the priests, the chilling silence that follows. You imagine the cold, empty pit, the terrifying purpose behind its simple design. The sense of inescapable doom is overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that smothers all hope. With a final chant, the priest signaled. Capac was seized by the royal guards, his struggles futile, and forced to stand on the edge of the platform. He was not thrown in but forced to stand there, exposed, utterly vulnerable, a living monument to his disgrace. The crowd, initially murmuring, was now silent, their faces a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. This was the fate of those who dared to defy the Sapa Inca, a divine retribution, a punishment that blurred the lines between law and supernatural terror. Days bled into nights. The cold was relentless, a constant, gnawing torment that never ceased. Capac shivered uncontrollably, his teeth chattering, his muscles spasming. Sleep was impossible, a cruel illusion denied by the constant discomfort and the piercing cold. His body, unable to find rest, began to ache with an intensity that transcended mere pain. His joints stiffened, his muscles cramped, his skin grew raw from exposure. The sun, when it finally appeared, offered no comfort. It merely highlighted his misery, casting long macabre shadows of his solitary form onto the ground below. He was exposed to the elements, to the wind, the rain, the occasional flurry of snow. His hair became matted, his skin cracked, his lips chapped and bleeding. He was given no food, no water, only the relentless exposure and the slow, agonizing descent into starvation. You, the observer, feel the relentless cold, the gnawing hunger, the burning thirst, the profound exhaustion that permeates every fiber of Kapak's being. You imagine the pain of frozen limbs, the raw, chafed skin, the relentless assault of the elements. The distant sounds of the city, the chatter of merchants, the laughter of children, the clanging of tools, were a cruel reminder of the life that continued, indifferent to his suffering. Kapak's mind began to fray. The constant pain, the lack of sleep, the relentless exposure, all conspired to break his spirit. He hallucinated, seeing his wife's face in the swirling clouds, hearing his children's voices in the whistling wind. He prayed desperate, fervent prayers to Inti, to Pachamama, to a pantheon of gods who seemed to have abandoned him. He begged for death, for an end to the torment, for the release that seemed to hover just out of reach. His body, slowly dying, began to consume itself. His stomach cramped with hunger, his throat raw with thirst. His skin, once firm, now hung loosely on his emaciated frame. He was a living skeleton, his eyes sunken, his face a gaunt mask of suffering. He was no longer Kapak, the respected administrator. He was merely a vessel of suffering, a testament to the absolute power of the Sapa Inca, a warning to all who witnessed his agonizing end. Finally, his breathing became shallow, ragged gasps. His body, racked by convulsions, stilled. Starvation and exposure had done their work, systematically dismantling him, extinguishing the spark of life. His eyes, though still open, were glazed over, unseeing, staring blankly at the indifferent mountain sky. The high priests concluded their chants, their voices echoing in the stillness. Kapak's body remained on the platform, a gruesome monument to the Incas' relentless pursuit of order, a chilling reminder of their nightmarish justice, where social annihilation and slow, agonizing death served as a brutal reminder of the consequences of perceived deviance. His death was not just an execution, but a public spectacle of utter degradation, a descent into a horror that transcended mere mortality, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it. The humid air of Tenochtitlan, laden with the scent of copal incense, blooming flowers, and the ever-present tang of dried blood, hung heavy over the Templo Mayor. For Xochitl, a young woman accused of sacrilege, defiling a sacred idol, this day marked her terrifying ascent to the sacrificial stone, a journey not of honor, but of agonizing dismemberment. Her crime, an act against the gods themselves, demanded a punishment so brutal it was reserved for the most grievous affronts to the divine order, a ritualistic execution designed to appease the wrath of the deities and serve as a chilling testament to the Aztecs' absolute devotion to their pantheon. You, the unseen observer, feel the oppressive humidity, the suffocating stillness of the air, broken only by the rhythmic drumming and the low, guttural chanting of the priests. You can almost taste the fear, sharp and metallic, on your tongue. Xochitl, her once vibrant hupil replaced by a simple, coarse white cloth, stood before the high priests of Huitzilopochtli, her face pale, etched with a profound despair. She had denied the accusations, pleaded for her life, affirmed her reverence for the gods, but her words were met with stony silence, with accusations of impurity and demonic influence. The Aztec gods demanded blood, and Xochitl was to be their offering. She was led through the throngs of silent, awestruck onlookers who lined the causeways leading to the Great Pyramid. Their faces were a mixture of fear, reverence, and morbid fascination. Children, clutching their mother's skirts, watched with wide, terrified eyes. Xochitl's mind, once filled with the simple joys of life, the scent of maize, the laughter of her family, the warmth of the sun, was now a maelstrom of regret and terror. She thought of her mother, her face etched with sorrow, and her younger siblings, whose future she had tried to secure. The thought of their despair, of the utter destruction of her family's honor, fueled a bitter anger, a desperate defiance against the overwhelming power that had crushed her. The procession ascended the steep steps of the Templo Mayor, each step a physical and spiritual ascent towards her doom. The air grew thinner, the drumming louder, the chants more fervent. At the summit, bathed in the harsh sunlight, stood the sacrificial stone, a large, convex slab of obsidian, stained dark with the blood of countless previous victims. Beside it, the obsidian knives of the priests, gleaming wickedly, awaited her. The high priests, their bodies painted black, their elaborate feather headdresses swaying, began their final incantations, their voices rising to a fever pitch, invoking the wrath of Huitzilopochtli, the war god, and Tlaloc, the rain god. Xochitl was forced onto the sacrificial stone, her body arched backward over its convex surface, her limbs spread wide, utterly vulnerable. She felt the cold, hard obsidian against her back, the rough hands of the priests pressing her down. She could hear the rhythmic drumming, the fervent chants, all merging into a horrifying symphony of impending doom. You, the unseen witness, feel the raw, primal fear of Xochitl. You hear the deafening drums, the guttural chants of the priests, the chilling silence that falls as the ritual intensifies. You imagine the cold, sharp obsidian, the terrifying purpose behind its simple design. The sense of inescapable doom is overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that smothers all hope. The chief priest, his obsidian knife gleaming, stepped forward. He began not with a swift, merciful blow, but with a series of precise, brutal incisions. The first cut was a deep slice across Xochitl's chest, a swift, agonizing opening that exposed her ribs. Xochitl screamed, a raw, animalistic sound ripped from the depths of her being. The pain was immediate, searing, a fiery agony that spread across her chest, drenching the stone in crimson. Her body convulsed, her muscles spasmed uncontrollably, her head thrashing from side to side. You, the observer, feel the profound agony, the excruciating precision of each cut, the sickening sound of flesh being opened. You imagine the raw, exposed internal organs, the delicate structures being brutally manipulated. The humid air, once oppressive, now feels like a searing flame against her open wounds. The priest then reached into her open chest, tearing out her still-beating heart, a gruesome offering to the gods. Xochitl's body convulsed one last time, a silent scream that died on her lips. Her eyes, wide with terror and agony, stared blankly at the sky, a vast, indifferent canvas. But the ritual was not yet complete. This was not merely about death, it was about dismemberment, a symbolic crushing of the serpent, a complete annihilation of the condemned. The priests, with their obsidian knives, began to dismember Xochitl's body, limb by agonizing limb. Each cut was a sickening crunch of bone, a tearing of flesh, a torrent of fresh blood. Her arms were severed, then her legs, then her head, each part offered to the gods, then thrown down the steps of the Templo Mayor, tumbling and bouncing, coming to rest at the base of the pyramid, a gruesome testament to the gods' insatiable hunger. You, the observer, confront the absolute horror of the dismemberment, a punishment so graphic, so visceral, it pushes the boundaries of human endurance. You imagine the sensation of your own limbs being severed, your body torn apart, your lifeblood flowing freely. The air is thick with the coppery tang of fresh blood, the pungent musk of raw flesh. The rhythmic drumming and chanting, once a distant drone, now seem to invade your very mind, a chilling soundtrack to this ultimate act of sacrifice and vengeance. Xochitl's body, now a collection of severed parts, lay scattered at the base of the Templo Mayor, a grotesque monument to Aztec devotion, a chilling testament to the unforgiving justice of their gods. You stand amidst the stunned silence, the chilling image of the ritual dismemberment seared into your mind, a haunting echo of a terrifying ancient practice, where the line between justice and ritualistic torture blurred into a single nightmarish reality. Her death was not just an execution, but a profound act of desecration, a descent into a horror that transcended mere mortality, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it. The gray, overcast skies of a late autumn morning hung low over the town square of Nuremberg, casting a somber pall over the assembled crowd. The biting wind carried with it the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and the palpable fear of the condemned. For Conrad, a miller accused of highway robbery and murder, this day marked his terrifying journey to the breaking point, a punishment so brutal it was reserved for the most heinous crimes, a ritualistic execution known as the breaking wheel, or the wheel of Catherine, designed not just to kill, but to systematically shatter the human body, a chilling testament to the era's brutal justice. You, the unseen observer, feel the cold seep into your bones, the raw, biting wind that mirrors the chill in Conrad's heart. You can almost taste the stale air, thick with the breath of the jeering crowd, their faces contorted by fear and righteous fury. Conrad, his once strong hands bound, his face pale, etched with a profound despair, stood before the town magistrate, his eyes downcast. He had denied the accusations, pleaded his innocence, but the evidence, circumstantial though it might be, had been enough. The magistrate's voice, a booming pronouncement, sealed his fate, painting a picture of a man utterly beyond redemption. He was led through the narrow streets, the crowds parting before him, their faces a mixture of fear, revulsion, and morbid curiosity. Children, clutching their mothers' skirts, pointed with wide, terrified eyes. Conrad's mind, once filled with the simple rhythms of his mill, the scent of fresh flour, the laughter of his children, was now a maelstrom of regret and terror. He thought of his wife, Greta, and their young daughter, Anna, their faces now a blur of tears in his mind. The thought of their despair, of the shame that would now cling to his family, was a torment almost as great as his own impending doom. The procession arrived at the execution ground, a vast, open space on the edge of the city. In the center stood the instrument of his doom, a massive wooden wheel, its spokes thick and unyielding, mounted horizontally on a sturdy frame. Beside it lay a heavy, iron-bound club, its surface rough and stained. This was no ordinary execution. This was a methodical dismantling, a public spectacle designed to inflict maximum pain and serve as a terrifying warning. The executioner, a hulking figure with a leather apron and a grim, impassive face, awaited him. He was an instrument of the town's justice, immune to the pleas and the suffering of his victims. Conrad was seized, his struggles futile, and forced onto the wheel. His limbs were stretched out, his arms and legs carefully positioned over the spokes, his joints aligned with the gaps between them. He felt the rough wood pressing against his back, the tight ropes biting into his wrists and ankles. He could hear the rhythmic chanting of the crowd, a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the very earth, a prelude to his agonizing demise. You, the unseen witness, feel the raw, primal fear of Conrad. You hear the low, guttural chants of the crowd, the chilling silence that falls as the ritual intensifies. You imagine the cold, hard wood of the wheel, the terrifying purpose behind its simple design. The sense of inescapable doom is overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that smothers all hope. The executioner, with a final, chilling gesture, raised his heavy, iron-bound club. He began not with a swift, merciful blow, but with a series of precise, brutal strikes. The first blow landed on Conrad's leg, a sickening crunch of bone that echoed through the square. Conrad screamed, a raw, animalistic sound ripped from the depths of his being. The pain was immediate, searing, a fiery agony that spread through his entire limb. His body convulsed, his muscles spasmed uncontrollably, his head thrashing from side to side. The executioner continued, his club falling with methodical precision, shattering Conrad's bones, one by agonizing one. His other leg was broken, then his arms, then his ribs. Each blow was a sickening crunch, a tearing of flesh, a torrent of fresh blood. Conrad's screams became hoarse, ragged gasps, then whimpers, then nothing but a choked, guttural moan. His body strained against the ropes, his muscles quivering with the effort, his mind struggling to comprehend the unimaginable torment being inflicted upon him. You, the observer, feel the profound agony, the excruciating precision of each blow, the sickening sound of bone being shattered. You imagine the raw, exposed flesh, the delicate internal structures being brutally manipulated. The cold air, once biting, now feels like a searing flame against his open wounds. With each broken bone, Conrad's body sagged, his strength failing. He felt a sickening lurch as his limbs became useless, mere shattered fragments of his former self. The pain was beyond comprehension, a constant, burning inferno that consumed his entire being. He could feel his lungs collapsing, his breathing becoming shallow, rattling gasps. Blood, warm and thick, welled up in his throat, choking him. He coughed, a terrible, gurgling sound, spitting crimson onto his chest. His eyes, wide with terror and agony, stared blankly at the bruised sky, a vast, indifferent canvas. The executioner continued his grim work, ensuring every major bone in Conrad's body was shattered, but carefully avoiding a fatal blow, prolonging the torment. They wanted him to suffer, to serve as a living, agonizing monument to their power. The wheel was then raised vertically, with Conrad's broken body still bound to it, a macabre display for all to see. He hung there, suspended, his shattered limbs dangling uselessly, his body a grotesque, twisted form. You, the observer, confront the absolute horror of the breaking wheel, a punishment so graphic, so visceral, it pushes the boundaries of human endurance. You imagine the sensation of your own bones being systematically shattered, your body reduced to a mangled mess, your lifeblood flowing freely. The air is thick with the coppery tang of fresh blood, the pungent musk of raw flesh. The cold, damp air seems to absorb his screams, amplifying the chilling silence that follows. Conrad's breathing became shallow, his chest barely rising. His eyes, though still open, were clouded with pain and despair, staring vacantly at the sky. His body, once a strong miller's frame, was now a grotesque canvas of shattered bones, raw flesh, and agonizing torment. He was no longer Conrad the miller. He was merely a vessel of suffering, a testament to the boundless cruelty of man, a chilling warning to anyone who dared to defy the established order, to step outside the narrow confines of societal norms. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, his last breath was a barely perceptible sigh, a shudder that rippled through his emaciated frame. Then silence. The wind continued to whistle through the spokes of the wheel, a mournful dirge echoing across the town square. Conrad's body, a broken, twisted form, remained on the wheel, a gruesome monument to medieval justice, a chilling testament to the unforgiving laws of the era. You stand amidst the stunned silence, the chilling image of the breaking wheel seared into your mind, a haunting echo of a terrifying ancient practice, where the line between justice and ritualistic torture blurred into a single, nightmarish reality. His death was not just an execution, but a profound act of desecration, a descent into a horror that transcended mere mortality, forever etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed it.